Brian Kelly met with reporters on Monday, kind of turning the page from Ole Miss to South Carolina. But learning from what went wrong against Ole Miss is going to be imperative for LSU continue to advance the season and getting to the goals they want. And I know when you have a week of negativity after a loss, going into an open date with a loss stinks because you just dwell on it. And so it's exacerbated all the problems and the conversations. What we might lose sight of is the fact that you're 5 games in. You got 7 more to go. You got 6 more league games. And yes, there are landmines all over. But the other thing that's very apparent when you have the opportunity to sit back, pull back, 10,000-foot view, look at college football, realize there aren't any dominant teams. And you're allowed to improve. I'll continue to give you the example of LSU in 2022, Brian Kelly's first year. Hideous loss in the opener against Florida State. Blasted at home by Tennessee. You end up beating undefeated Ole Miss. You beat Alabama. You go to the SEC championship game. You won 10 games. Improved tremendously. So you're allowed to get better, and this team needs to improve and get better, no doubt. But there's also a path where you can look and say, LSU's a big favorite at home against South Carolina. They'll be favored on the road against Vanderbilt. They'll be a favorite at home against Texas A&M if you win your next 3. But if you win your next 3, you go into an open date with 4 games to go. You'll be a big favorite at home against Western Kentucky and Arkansas. Can you split games at Bama, at Oklahoma? You do that, you're 10-2, you're in the playoff. It's a path. It's a path forward. And I think that's the one that LSU's got to look at taking heretofore. But the offense has got to improve. The defense is playing at a championship level. I don't think anybody would dispute that. The offense has got to get better. Brian Kelly knows that. And he said, on Monday that they did a good bit of time self-scouting the offense during the open date.
We've been so much better in the second half than the first half. From an offensive perspective, play a little bit more to our strengths. And really, like I had mentioned, much more of an efficient 4 quarters of offense is what's needed. There's no major changes. There's no, hey, we're going to go to a split back veer or do something crazy here. We have to be more efficient in our passing game. We've got to hit shots down the field. And then we have to be much more efficient with the run game. So we've been working hard on it. Our guys have. I'm proud of the way they really locked in last week in a bye week. And my expectations is this offense is going to continue to get better week after week.
The team scored first against Ole Miss and led 7-0 and then didn't score again until the second half. They put together a touchdown and 2 field goals in the second half, and obviously settling for field goals instead of touchdowns is kind of what cost you that ball game, the inability to convert when you had opportunities. So, but you look at it in turn and you say, your defense was on the field the whole game and still only gave up 24 points. And you only lost by 5. As poorly as you played, you were right there in that football game with a chance potentially to win it. But you got to get better. I don't know. I guess you could make the case of what he's saying about the offense playing better in the second half than the first. We kind of saw that play out in the Clemson game as well, as it was really a sluggish first half where Clemson went into the half leading 10-3. LSU had a field goal in the first half, and they ended up scoring touchdowns each in the third and the fourth quarter. And by the way, you had the Barry and Brown play as well, which would have been a third touchdown in the second half. So there's some validity there, as he says, playing a full 4 quarters. But my contention has been, certainly in the Ole Miss loss, that you've got to show more of a commitment to running the football. And Brian Kelly's continued to say they need to be better in the passing game, and I'm not disputing that as well. Through 5 games, Garrett Nussmeier is averaging 100 yards per game less than he did through 5 games a year ago. Through 5 games last year, he was averaging 331 yards. Right now, he's averaging 231 yards. So he is 100 yards less through 5 games than he was averaging through 5 games a year ago. So, yes, you absolutely have to get better and more efficient throwing the football because that is your strength. A 5th-year senior quarterback, all these great weapons on the outside. But we've also talked about this a ton. It's not my opinion. Brian Kelly said it against Ole Miss. Ole Miss, 86% of their defensive snaps dropped 8. 86% of the defensive snaps, Ole Miss dropped 8 in coverage. They rushed 3. And Ole Miss was getting pressure with 3, and you couldn't run the football. Or you didn't run the football. That's largely been my contention. There was only 2 times that entire game where you handed the ball off on consecutive plays. Only 2 times in the entire game did you hand the ball off in consecutive plays. And one of them was the goal line situation where he went back-to-back runs to Harlan Berry where he scored the touchdown. So I would argue that it is a lack of commitment to the running game, like was a problem a year ago where they were 60-40 pass run. And I understand playing to your strength, but if you're going to see a three-man front, you've got to be willing to run the football against a three-man box. And that's something Brian Kelly was asked. How much of the inability to run right now is just lack of commitment to running the football?
Yeah, it's circumstantial, too, a lot in terms of the runs, right? You want to be able to set up what you're doing as a play caller. And look, I think Joe does a really good job. He obviously is under the microscope. I get it. He gets it. We're looking for balance in our offense. And sometimes the circumstances are such that, a run call doesn't make sense here. But we clearly understand the need for balance. We clearly understand the need to complement our defense. And you can't do it just by throwing it.
Actions speak louder than words. You can't do it by just throwing it. But then I look at that game against Ole Miss where you threw the ball 34 times and you ran it 22 times. Despite the fact that 86% of the snaps, you had an honest look or you had numbers, which is something else like Brian Kelly said on Monday. He's like, to run the ball, they've got to have a fair box. Well, if you got 5 offensive linemen, they got 3 defensive linemen, you should be running the football there. So I would love to hear him elaborate more on that point. Fortunately, the mic didn't get back to me. I would have asked that follow-up. But it's one of those where I can understand not always wanting to just blame the play caller. I'd say it all the time. It's low-hanging fruit. It's the easiest thing to do. But when you look sometimes, like it comes down to execution. Not always. I think there were a lot of great play calls that executed properly, LSU scores. And we've gone over plenty of those. But you also were playing largely in a one-score game for the bulk of this game, and you didn't need to abandon the run to just focus on throwing the football. You got to make a commitment to doing it. And one of the other things that this is a question that I asked Brian Kelly was about Alex Atkins, because remember, when LSU hired Brad Davis, Alex Atkins was also at the top of that list. He was the offensive line coach at Florida State at the time. And Atkins decided to stay at Florida State. They made him offensive coordinator under Mike Norvell, and LSU hired Brad Davis. Well, Florida State, he was the offensive coordinator at Florida State when they had the undefeated season, and then a year later they went 2-10. And Florida State had to have a fall guy, and Alex Atkins became that. He became the scapegoat, and they fired him. And so LSU was able to hire Alex Atkins as their tight ends coach. So you have this very accomplished offensive line coach who's got Power 4 offensive coordinator experience as well. And if you're watching the games, when they show Joe Sloan in the press box, the man sitting immediately to Joe's side is Alex Atkins. So, I asked Brian Kelly on Monday about Atkins, his role on game days, involvement in play calling, things like that, and how much of a resource he may be.
Yeah, they're collaborating. In particular, Alex has been assigned the run game, and I think that collaboration occurs. I can hear it on the headsets. They work well together, and that's why, I've said this before, we want to run the ball more efficiently, but I see the signs of that coming together. So we expect that to get better and better as the season goes on. But, yeah, those two are collaborating on game day.
That, I think, is something worth watching. Remember last year when LSU lost back-to-back games, Texas A&M and Alabama, they went to Florida, and then Brian Kelly had the play sheet. And that was sort of a now sort of infamous moment with Brian Kelly with play sheet. And he admitted, of course I have the play sheet. Of course I'll help where he can provide insight. I don't blame him at all. He's the head coach, and he's an accomplished offensive coach for 3 decades. And if you're having issues, yes, I have no problem at all with the head coach having a play sheet. In the same way that if Mike Norvell, who's not calling plays at Florida State, wants a play sheet while Gus Malzahn's calling the offense, or Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. are collaborating there, I have no problem whatsoever with the head coach influencing things that way if they feel like they need to or can be a resource or an asset in that situation. But they continue to say we need to run the ball better. We need to be more efficient. Okay, well, it starts with committing to running the football. So you play South Carolina this week. Let's see what the run-pass breakdown looks like, because what you did at Ole Miss was you threw it 34 times and you ran it 22. And by the head coach's admission, you were seeing 3-man fronts 86% of the time. That would stand to reason you should be running the football against those fronts, and you didn't. Let's see if those numbers change this weekend when South Carolina comes in. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.